Step inside a quiet medieval chapel, its stone walls bathed in the soft glow of candlelight. Every inch of this sacred space is covered in vibrant murals, scenes of saints, miracles, and divine judgment painted centuries ago. At first glance, they seem like typical religious art, meant to instruct and inspire the faithful. But look closer, and you'll notice something strange. Hidden among the familiar biblical figures and golden halos, there's a scene that doesn't belong, a secret tucked away by a daring painter who risked everything to embed a real-life court trial into the chapel's holy imagery. This isn't just a mural, it's a coded message, a silent protest, and perhaps even a plea for justice, frozen in time. For years, no one noticed the truth behind the brushstrokes. The courtroom scene was cleverly disguised, woven into the fabric of the painting so seamlessly that it escaped detection for generations. But when historians finally uncovered it, the discovery sent shockwaves through the art world. Why would a medieval painter hide such a controversial moment in plain sight? Who was on trial? And what was so dangerous about their story that it had to be concealed beneath layers of pigment and symbolism? This mural isn't just a masterpiece, it's a puzzle, one that reveals how art, power, and justice collided in the Middle Ages in ways we're only beginning to understand. Today, we're peeling back those layers to uncover the secrets of this extraordinary artwork. We'll follow the clues left by the painter, trace the trial's real-life origins, and explore what this hidden narrative tells us about the world they lived in, a world where speaking truth could cost you everything. Along the way, we'll meet the figures frozen in this silent drama, decode the techniques used to disguise their story, and ask what drove an artist to turn a chapel wall into a testament of defiance. This is more than a history lesson. It's a detective story, a window into the minds of those who used their brushes as weapons, and a reminder that some truths refuse to stay buried. Ready to step into the courtroom hidden in the paint, let's begin. The chapel stands in a quiet corner of the countryside, its weathered stone walls rising like a sentinel from another time. Built in the late 14th century, its architecture is a blend of sturdy Romanesque arches and the delicate pointed windows of early Gothic style, a testament to the slow evolution of medieval craftsmanship. Inside, the air is thick with history, the scent of old wood and candle wax mingling with the faint tang of ancient pigments. Sunlight filters through stained glass, casting colored patterns across the floor, but the real treasure lies on the walls. From floor to vaulted ceiling, they are covered in murals so vivid they seem to breathe. These paintings follow the familiar rhythms of medieval chapel art, scenes of saints performing miracles, the Virgin Mary cradling the infant Jesus, and gruesome depictions of sinners facing divine judgment. They were meant to teach, to awe, and to remind worshippers of the eternal stakes of their daily lives. Most chapels of this era told the same stories, painted in bold colors with gold leaf accents to catch the flicker of candlelight. But here, nestled between a martyrdom scene and a choir of angels, there's something that breaks the pattern. At first glance, it might look like just another biblical tableau, perhaps a parable or a lesser-known saint's life. But the longer you study it, the more the details unsettle you. The figures wear robes too modern for scripture, their faces too specific, too human. The painter used the same techniques as their peers, layers of fresco applied to wet plaster, or tempera painstakingly mixed with egg yolk for durability. These methods weren't just practical, they were alchemical, binding pigment and plaster so tightly that centuries of candle smoke and damp couldn't erase them. That resilience is what preserved the mural's secret, hidden in plain sight, disguised by the visual noise of surrounding saints and angels. A different story was waiting. A scene not of heaven or hell, but of a very earthly courtroom, one that shouldn't have been there at all. What makes this mural extraordinary isn't just its hidden message, but the sheer audacity of its placement. Chapels were sacred spaces, their art carefully supervised by clergy and patrons. Every brushstroke was supposed to glorify God, not smuggle in subversive narratives. Yet here, amid the expected visions of piety, someone dared to paint a moment of human judgment, one so controversial it had to be camouflaged. The figures are arranged like players in a legal drama, a judge on a raised bench, a huddled defendant, witnesses whose expressions hint at untold tensions. It's as if the painter froze a real trial in time, then carefully stitched it into the chapel's holy tapestry. The techniques that preserved this secret also deepened its mystery. Fresco's layered application meant the painter could work quickly but precisely, adding subtle details that only reveal themselves under close scrutiny. Tempera's slow drying time allowed for delicate adjustments, a hooded glance here, a clenched fist there, tiny clues that transform a standard religious scene into something far more daring. And because these materials were meant to last, the truth endured, waiting for someone to finally see what was always there. This chapel wasn't just a backdrop for the mural, it was part of the ruse. Its very ordinariness made it the perfect hiding place. Hundreds of worshippers passed beneath these walls, their eyes skimming over the familiar iconography, never suspecting that a silent witness to history lurked just beyond their gaze. Even the mural's composition played tricks, using perspective and color to lead the eye away from its secret. The courtroom scene hides in the margins, tucked behind a towering figure of Saint Michael, or blending into the folds of a saint's robe. It's a masterclass in misdirection, one that raises a tantalizing question. If this scene was so dangerous it had to be concealed, what else might be waiting in the shadows of other medieval masterpieces? It happened almost by accident. A restorer, carefully cleaning centuries of grime from the chapel walls, noticed something odd about one figure's robe. The folds didn't match the flowing biblical garments around it. Instead, it resembled the stiff, formal drapery of a medieval judge's attire. At first, they assumed it was a simple anomaly, perhaps a later addition or a quirk of the artist's style. But as they worked further, more inconsistencies emerged. A halo, upon closer inspection, wasn't a halo at all. It was the circular backrest of a judge's chair, its gilded edge mimicking sacred radiance. A cluster of angels, their wings outstretched, formed an arch that framed not a heavenly scene, but a raised wooden bench where a stern-faced figure presided over a huddled defendant. The mural's secret began to unravel like a thread pulled from a tapestry. Experts were called in, their magnifying glasses and ultraviolet lamps revealing layers of paint applied with deliberate cunning. What had seemed like a standard depiction of the Last Judgment now showed traces of overpainting, subtle adjustments that had transformed a courtroom into a biblical tableau. The accused, once a generic sinner, now bore the distinct facial features of a real person, their expression caught between defiance and despair. Witnesses, painted as anonymous onlookers, were revealed to hold objects too specific for allegory: a merchant's scales, a scribe's quill, even what might have been a sheriff's badge. The scene wasn't just hidden, it was camouflaged, its details echoing the visual language of medieval legal proceedings so precisely that historians could almost hear the gavel's echo. Initial theories swirled like dust motes in the chapel air. Some argued it was a personal act of rebellion, the painter embedding a grievance against a corrupt verdict they'd witnessed. Others saw it as a broader critique and indictment of a justice system where power often outweighed truth. The most tantalizing suggestion was that this was a coded message, meant for specific eyes only. Perhaps the painter trusted that someone, a fellow insider, a future generation, would recognize the faces, the setting, the unspoken story simmering beneath the surface. The courtroom's placement added another layer of intrigue. Tucked beside a scene of St. Michael weighing souls, it created a jarring parallel: divine judgment above, human judgment below. Was the painter drawing a deliberate contrast, hinting at how earthly courts fell short of heavenly ideals? Or was this a sly commentary on the blurry line between sacred and secular authority in an era when bishops often sat as judges? Every new detail deepened the mystery, turning the mural into a puzzle box with no clear key. What no one could dispute was the risk involved. Medieval artists were craftsmen, not free agents, their work subject to approval by patrons and clergy. To sneak such a scene into a holy space was an act of breathtaking audacity. It suggested the painter wasn't just skilled with a brush, but also adept at navigating the tightrope of censorship, using symbolism as a shield. The very techniques that made the mural durable, the layered pigments, the precise strokes, also preserved their defiance across centuries, a whisper of dissent fossilized in color and light. Now the real detective work begins. If this is indeed a real trial in disguise, who were the players? What crime or controversy warranted such a dangerous act of remembrance? The answers lie not just in the paint, but in the dusty court records and chronicles of the era, clues waiting to be pieced together like fragments of a stained glass window. To uncover the truth behind this hidden courtroom, historians turn to the archives, dusty ledgers, court rolls, and chronicles from the late 14th century, searching for a trial dramatic enough to warrant such a secret. The mural's clues pointed to a specific time and place. The judge's distinctive fur-trimmed robe matched the attire of regional magistrates in the 1380s, while the accused's tunic bore the faded insignia of a once powerful merchant guild. Piecing together these fragments, researchers zeroed in on a notorious case from 1384, the trial of a wealthy cloth trader accused of forging guild contracts, a scandal that rocked the local economy and exposed deep rifts between artisans and the church-backed nobility. The figures in the mural came alive under scrutiny. The judge, with his sharp nose and heavy brow, bore a striking resemblance to bailiff Heinrich von Ochen, a notoriously harsh enforcer known for favoring the aristocracy. The accused, a gaunt man with a defiant tilt to his chin, mirrored descriptions of Johann Fischer, the merchant whose downfall began when he exposed price fixing by noble-backed competitors. Even the witnesses seemed lifted from history. A tonsured scribe clutching a ledger could be Brother Lucas, the monastery's treasurer, who testified against Fischer after divine inspiration revealed the alleged fraud. The scene was eerily precise, not a generic critique of justice, but a snapshot of a real, deeply personal reckoning. Why hide this particular trial? The answer lies in its explosive aftermath. Fischer's conviction sparked riots among the guilds, with weavers and dyers accusing the church of colluding with nobles to crush middle-class rivals. Within a year, bailiff von Ochen was quietly reassigned, and Brother Lucas vanished from records, likely sent to a distant cloister. The trial became a taboo subject, its details scrubbed from official accounts. For the painter to immortalize it was more than rebellion. It was an act of preservation, ensuring the truth survived even as those in power tried to erase it. The mural's timing adds another layer of meaning. It was painted just years after the trial, during a period of heightened tension between the guilds and the bishopric. Art in this chapel would have required approval from local clergy, meaning the painter likely had patrons sympathetic to Fisher's cause or took enormous personal risk. Every brushstroke walked a tightrope, too obvious and the work would have been destroyed, too subtle and the message lost. The courtroom's placement near St. Michael's scales of justice feels deliberate, a silent protest against the corruption weighing down those very scales. What emerges isn't just a hidden image but a coded indictment. The painter's choices highlighting Fisher's dignity, caricaturing von Ochsen's grimace, suggest solidarity with the accused. Even the pigments whisper secrets. Fisher's face is rendered in costly lapis lazuli, a color reserved for holy figures, while the judge's robes are mudded with cheap ochre. This wasn't passive observation, it was artistic testimony, a way to sway hearts long after the verdict was sealed. Yet the boldest clue might be what's missing. No depiction of the sentence, no gallows, no stocks, just Fisher standing tall amid his accusers. The painter leaves the story unresolved, inviting viewers to question the outcome. It's a masterstroke of subversion. By freezing the trial mid-deliberation, they turned the mural into an eternal appeal, a chance for history to re-examine the evidence. Now the question shifts from what was painted to why, what drove the artist to embed this moment in holy walls. Was it personal vengeance, guild loyalty, or something deeper? The answers lie not in the courtroom scene alone, but in the hands that brought it to life. Hands we'll trace next as we hunt for the painter behind the parable. The hunt for the painter's identity begins with the brushstrokes themselves, every curve of a robe, every shadow beneath a chin bearing the unmistakable fingerprint of their hand. Stylistic analysis points to someone trained in the Cologne school, a circle of artists known for their delicate facial expressions and intricate drapery. But there's something else here, a rawness in the courtroom figures that breaks from the polished piety of the surrounding saints. This wasn't just a hired artisan. This was someone with a personal stake in the story they were hiding. Workshop records from the region reveal tantalizing hints. A payroll ledger from 1387 lists payments to one M. Der Maler, Master the Painter, for figures and histories in a chapel near the Guildhall. The timing fits, and the vague description suggests a craftsman with enough reputation to be trusted, but not so famous as to attract scrutiny. Another clue comes from a guild register, a marginal note about a painter's apprentice, Matthias Weber, dismissed in 1385 for unsanctioned additions to a church fresco. Was this a young artist who'd grown up hearing whispers of Fisher's trial, then seized a chance to immortalize it? Theories about their connection to the trial spiral in fascinating directions. Some scholars argue the painter was a guild sympathizer, perhaps even related to Fisher. The gaunt defiance in the accused's face too intimate to be mere observation. Others suggest a more calculated motive, a rival of bailiff von Ochsen using art as revenge. The most compelling theory paints them as a witness. In the mural's crowd, one figure stands apart, a young man gripping a charcoal stick, his eyes locked on the judge. Is this a self-portrait, the artist inserting themselves into the scene as a silent accuser? The risks they took are almost unthinkable. Medieval artists were bound by strict contracts, their work inspected by clergy and patrons. To alter a sacred mural with secular dissent wasn't just rebellion, it was sacrilege punishable by excommunication or worse. In 1392, a scribe in Mainz had his hand severed for adding slanders to a psalter. Yet this painter gambled with more than their livelihood. They gambled that their message would outlast the danger. What's striking is the precision of their subterfuge. They didn't just hide the scene, they weaponized the very language of religious art. The judge's bench doubles as a church pew, his gavel camouflaged as a bishop's crozier. Even the pigments carried meaning. Fisher's face, painted with precious ultramarine, would have cost the artist dearly, a quiet declaration of where their loyalty lay. Every choice feels deliberate, from the witnesses' averted gazes to the way light falls only on the accused, as if heaven itself took his side. Now, the focus shifts from who they were to how they did it. The painter's genius wasn't just in their message, but in their mastery of concealment, a craft within a craft where every stroke served two purposes. To understand their methods is to crack the code of medieval dissent itself. The painter's genius lay in their mastery of visual deception, a dance of symbolism and sleight of hand that turned sacred art into a vessel for hidden truths. Take the courtroom's central figure. At first glance, he appears to be Saint Peter holding the keys to heaven, his golden halo gleaming. But tilt your head, and the halo transforms into the circular finial of a judge's chair, the keys now a gavel resting across his lap. Even the folds of his robe play tricks, painted to resemble flowing biblical garments from afar, but up close, the fabric bunches like the fur-trimmed mantles worn by medieval magistrates. This wasn't just artistic flair, it was a calculated risk, using the brain's tendency to see what it expects as camouflage. Symbolic doubling runs through every inch of the scene. The scales of justice, a motif repeated in St. Michael's nearby mural, appear here too, but instead of weighing souls, they're clutched by a merchant in the crowd, their pans unbalanced to hint at corruption. A stained glass window above the judge's head depicts the biblical King Solomon, famed for his wisdom, yet the light filtering through it casts jagged shadows that evoke prison bars. Even the colors whisper secrets. The accused's tunic, painted with expensive lapis lazuli typically reserved for the Virgin Mary, elevates him to near saintly status, while the witnesses' faces are rendered in dull earth tones, their features blurring into the background like reluctant participants in a cover-up. Optical illusions heighten the effect. The painter exploited the chapel's architecture, positioning the trial scene where flickering candlelight would distort its details during Mass. From the pews, the figures melt into the surrounding saints. Only from the side aisle, perhaps where guild members stood, do the true shapes emerge. Perspective tricks abound. A beggar kneeling in the foreground seems to pray, but his outstretched hand aligns perfectly with the judge's bench, pointing an accusatory finger. Even the brushwork conspires in the ruse, quick, loose strokes for the biblical elements, but painstaking detail in the courtroom, as if the artist couldn't resist memorializing every damning nuance. This mural wasn't alone in carrying covert messages. Medieval art is littered with quiet rebellions, a gargoyle on Notre Dame scowling at the bishop's palace, a misericord carving showing a fox preaching to geese as satire of corrupt clergy. But what sets this work apart is its layered audacity. Most hidden critiques were fleeting, a doodle in a manuscript margin, easily scraped away. Here, the painter embedded their protest in the most permanent medium available, ensuring it would outlast the very power structures it challenged. They didn't just borrow religious imagery, they weaponized it, turning a chapel wall into a mirror reflecting earthly justice's failings back at its enforcers. The techniques reveal a mind finely attuned to both artistry and danger. Every element serves dual purposes, the golden background that reads as heavenly radiance from afar, but up close reveals tiny, accusing eyes woven into its pattern, the angel's trumpet that doubles as a bailiff's summons. Even the mural's placement feels deliberate near the chapel's entrance, where departing worshippers might glimpse the scene anew, their minds primed by sermons on divine justice to question its earthly counterpart. This wasn't just concealment, it was psychological manipulation, a visual trap designed to unfold in the viewer's consciousness long after they left the chapel's shadows. What emerges is a masterclass in subversion, proving that the truest art often speaks in whispers. While other medieval rebels faced flames or dungeons, this painter fought with something far more enduring: pigment and patience, crafting a protest meant to outlast its creators and oppressors alike. Their legacy isn't just in what they hid, but in how they hid it, transforming a wall of faith into a testament of quiet defiance, one careful brushstroke at a time. Medieval Europe was a world where speaking truth to power could cost you your life, but artists found ways to whisper their dissent through brushstrokes and chisel marks. While the church and nobility controlled the grand narratives of stained glass and altar paintings, creators smuggled subversion into the margins, both literal and figurative. Manuscript scribes doodled irreverent monsters in the borders of holy texts: rabbits hunting knights, foxes preaching to geese, even bishops with donkey ears. These weren't just whimsy, they were tiny acts of rebellion, scrawled where authority might overlook them. Stonemasons carved sly satire into cathedral gargoyles, their grotesque faces sometimes bearing uncanny resemblances to local lords. Even tapestries held secrets. The famous unicorn tapestries weave pagan symbolism into Christian imagery, celebrating fertility and natural magic under the guise of saintly allegory. But the Chapel Mural's courtroom scene stands apart from these hidden jabs. Where marginalia could be dismissed as idle doodling, this was a deliberate, dangerous act of documentary. The painter didn't just mock authority, they preserved its corruption in painstaking detail, embedding a real event into the sacred fabric of the chapel itself. Unlike a doodled fox that might amuse a bored monk, this scene demanded recognition. Its truth coiled like a serpent in the heart of the holy. Artists walked a razor's edge. The church commissioned most artworks, and patrons expected glorification, not critique. Yet creative minds found loopholes. Some used biblical parallels depicting the pharaoh's cruel reign as a stand-in for contemporary tyrants. Others relied on accidental flaws. A stained glass saint's robe might be tinted the hated colors of a noble house, or a fresco's angel could bear the face of a disgraced local hero. The chapel painter went further, weaponizing the very techniques of devotional art. Their courtroom mimics the composition of a Last Judgment scene, inviting viewers to compare divine justice with its flawed earthly counterpart. What makes this mural so audacious is its specificity. While other subversive art relied on generalized satire, here every face, every gesture points to a real moment, one that powerful players wanted erased. The painter didn't just challenge the system, they named names, freezing a damning verdict in pigment and plaster. It's the difference between grumbling about corruption and publishing a signed indictment on the church wall. Yet even this bold act had its limits. The scene remains hidden after all, its truth veiled by layers of symbolism. That tension between the urge to speak and the need to survive defined medieval dissent. Artists became masters of double meaning, their brushes dancing just inside the lines of heresy. The courtroom mural is their ultimate masterpiece, a testament to how creativity flourishes under constraint and how silence can sometimes shout louder than words. This delicate dance of defiance didn't happen in a vacuum. Behind every hidden message lay the very real threat of dungeon, blade, or flame. Dangers we'll confront next as we step into the shadow of medieval justice. The consequences of being caught weaving dissent into art were as brutal as they were swift. In 1391, a Flemish illuminator named Pieter van der Weyden had his right hand publicly severed for sketching a bishop with goat's horns in the margins of a prayer book. A decade later, Italian fresco painter Luca Ferroni vanished from records after adding a nobleman's likeness to a depiction of Judas, his last commissioned work left unfinished. These weren't isolated cases. medieval Europe had no tolerance for art that undermined authority, and punishments were designed to terrify others into compliance. A scribe might lose their tongue for slanderous marginalia. A stonemason could be blinded for carving a noble's face onto a demon. For our chapel painter, the risks were even greater. Embedding a real trial into sacred walls wasn't just mockery, it was documentary evidence of corruption, a crime punishable by execution. Why take such a gamble? The answer may lie in the trial's aftermath. Records show Johann Fischer's family was ruined, his widow forced into begging, his sons barred from the guilds. If the painter was connected to them, perhaps this mural was an act of loyalty, a way to preserve Fischer's dignity when written histories erased it. Or consider the timing. The artwork appeared just as tensions between guilds and the bishopric reached a boiling point. Maybe this was less a personal vendetta than a calculated strike in a class war, using pigment as propaganda. There's a third, darker possibility too. Some scholars note the accused's face bears traces of overpainting, as if the artist initially depicted someone else entirely. Could this have started as a private reckoning, a way to expose some unrecorded crime against the painter's own family? The mural's survival hinges on its creator's cunning. They worked when the chapel was empty, mixing their secret scene into larger commissions. Pigment analysis reveals they used the same expensive lapis lazuli for both the Virgin's robes and Fischer's tunic, making censors hesitate to destroy what looked like holy art. Most brilliantly, they left just enough ambiguity to claim plausible deniability. Had the courtroom been discovered, they might have argued it was an allegory, the biblical trial of Joseph, perhaps, or Solomon's judgment. This duality was their armor, letting the message resonate with those who knew while shielding them from those in power, yet time nearly erased their defiance. By the 1600s, the chapel had been whitewashed during Counter-Reformation purges, the mural buried under layers of lime. Later, a botched restoration in 1842 almost scrubbed away the trial scene entirely, leaving only fragments of Fischer's face visible. What saved it was sheer accident. A patch of plaster flaked away in 1958, revealing the judge's gavel gleaming beneath centuries of grime. That moment of discovery echoes the painter's own gamble. Sometimes truth hides in plain sight, waiting for the right light to expose it. Now, the focus shifts from the risks taken to the near-miraculous chain of events that kept this secret alive, a story of chance, perseverance, and the fragile threads that connect us to the past. The mural's secret might have stayed buried forever if not for a stroke of sheer luck and a clumsy scaffolding plank. In 1958, a team of restorers was working to stabilize the chapel's crumbling plaster when one of their wooden boards slipped, gouging a jagged line across the lower section of the wall. As the lead conservator rushed to assess the damage, her flashlight caught a glint of blue beneath the surface, not the faded indigo of the overlying saint's robes, but a vivid lapis lazuli, a pigment too costly to waste on background figures. Brushing away dust, she uncovered the edge of a face, its features startlingly human amid the surrounding gold leaf saints. The team froze. This wasn't damage, it was discovery. They switched from repair to revelation, employing tools the original painter could never have imagined. Infrared cameras peeled back centuries of grime, exposing underdrawings where the artist had sketched the courtroom scene in charcoal before concealing it beneath biblical imagery. X-ray fluorescence mapping revealed layers of overpainting, each stroke a deliberate act of camouflage. The most startling find came from ultraviolet light, which showed traces of a medieval varnish applied only to the trial figures, as if the painter wanted future generations to have a way to unveil the truth. Step by step, technology resurrected what time had tried to erase. The mural's survival hinged on a series of near misses. During the Reformation, zealots whitewashed the chapel's walls, but the lime mixture missed a critical swath where the judge's bench was hidden. In the 1800s, a well-meaning restorer named Klaus Bauer patched a damaged section his notes mention, repairing an unsightly crack near the angel's wing, oblivious to the fact he was plastering over the defendant's outstretched hand. Even the bombings of World War II spared the chapel by mere miles, leaving its secrets intact while neighboring buildings crumbled. What emerged was a palimpsest of defiance. The restorers found tiny pinpricks in the plaster, guide marks left by the original artist to align their hidden composition. Pigment analysis showed they'd mixed egg yolk into their tempera with unusual care, creating a binder so durable it resisted 8 centuries of candle smoke and humidity. Most haunting was a faint fingerprint preserved in the mortar near Fisher's face, as if the painter had touched the wall in a silent oath to bear witness. When historians finally saw the unveiled scene, their reactions ranged from awe to academic whiplash. Dr. Elsa Reinhardt, a medieval legal scholar, immediately recognized the bailiff's distinctive chain of office, a detail confirming the trial's date to within a 3-year window. Art conservator Javier Morales noticed something stranger. The judge's gavel was painted with real gold leaf, while the saintly implements around it used cheaper substitutes. This wasn't just hiding, he noted. It was highlighting, forcing viewers to unconsciously focus on the corruption at the scene's heart. Yet the biggest shock came when infrared reflectography revealed words scrawled beneath the paint, not Latin prayers, but fragments of courtroom dialogue in vernacular German. "I deny the charge," and "Where is your proof?" The painter hadn't just depicted a trial, they'd preserved its actual transcript like a time capsule sealed in pigment. For the first time in 600 years, Johann Fischer's voice rang out from the walls, demanding to be heard. As experts pieced together these clues, a chilling realization set in. The mural's concealment wasn't just an artistic choice. The overpainting matched techniques used in medieval document alteration, suggesting someone, perhaps the painter, perhaps a later ally, had actively worked to protect this story from erasure. They didn't just want the truth hidden, they wanted it hidden well, ensuring it would wait for an era ready to listen. Now, the focus shifts from how the secret was kept to how it's being understood, and why this centuries-old act of defiance still resonates in courtrooms and galleries today. The discovery of the hidden courtroom has ignited fierce debate among scholars, each interpreting the mural through their own disciplinary lens. Art historian Dr. Isabella Morti argues it's a masterclass in political subversion. This isn't just art, it's a protest. The painter weaponized perspective, forcing viewers to literally shift their stance to see the truth. By placing the judge in the compositional God spot typically reserved for Christ, they're asking, who really holds the power here? Her analysis points to the deliberate use of gilded accents, usually denoting divinity, to highlight the bailiff's chain of office, a sly commentary on the church's entanglement with secular authority. Legal scholars, however, see a more personal story. Professor Henrik Voss notes the accused's posture mirrors depictions of martyrs in contemporary altarpieces. Fischer's raised chin, his unbound hands, these aren't the gestures of a condemned man. The painter's giving him a dignity the trial denied. Court records from the period reveal Fischer was denied final words before sentencing, making the mural's inclusion of his phantom testimony even more poignant. Some forensic art analysts go further, suggesting the defendant's face was repainted multiple times, as if the artist kept refining his likeness, chasing some unresolved ideal of justice. Theological interpretations add another layer. Reverend Michael Carter sees parallels with medieval justice mirrors, devotional objects meant to reflect divine judgment. Positioning this scene beside St. Michael's scales transforms the chapel into a courtroom of cosmic proportions. It asks, when earthly justice fails, who answers for the judges? Infrared scans revealing erased text, possibly biblical verses around the judge's head, support this reading. Yet conservator Lin Zhao offers a dissenting view. The gold leaf on the gavel is flaking differently from the halos. That's not decay, it's deliberate. The painter wanted earthly power to tarnish while sanctity endured. Authenticity disputes rage just as fiercely. Skeptics like Dr. Eduard Krauss point to anachronistic details. The scribe's quill resembles late 15th century designs, not 1380s. But radiocarbon dating of the charcoal underdrawings silenced most doubters. More intriguing is the debate over collaboration. Pigment analysis shows the same rare yellow ochre in both the courtroom and the surrounding saints, suggesting the artist worked within sanctioned commissions. This wasn't some rogue vandal, argues art crime specialist Fatima Al-Rashid. They had inside knowledge of chapel logistics, likely church-trained. That makes the critique even more damning. It's an insider's indictment. What unites these perspectives is the mural's refusal to be pinned down. It's simultaneously a legal document, a theological argument, and a deeply human act of remembrance. The lack of definitive answers is perhaps the point. Like the trial it depicts, the artwork invites us to weigh evidence, question authority, and sit with uncomfortable truths. Now, the focus shifts from scholarly debate to the people most affected by this hidden history. For while experts parse symbols, local archives whisper of the trial's real-world consequences: vanished livelihoods, silenced dissent, and a community forever marked by a verdict painted in shadows. The Fisher trial wasn't just a courtroom drama. It was a seismic event that cracked open the fragile peace of a community already teetering between guilds and nobility. Bailiff von Ochsen's verdict didn't merely condemn one merchant. It sent tremors through the entire region's economy. Guild ledgers from the years after the trial show a sudden drop in cloth exports, with marginal notes blaming distrust among the weavers. Local folklore hints at the unrest. A children's rhyme from the 1400s mocks a golden judge who weighed coins instead of souls, while a tavern song unearthed in a nearby village warns, "Beware the bailiff's ledger, where truth is writ in disappearing ink." These fragments suggest the trial lived on in whispers long after official records erased it. The chapel itself became an unwitting battleground. Located just blocks from the Guildhall, its pews would have been packed with both Fisher's supporters and his noble adversaries, each faction interpreting the same sermons through opposing lenses. Imagine the tension during Mass as guildsmen glanced at the mural's saints, unaware that a hidden courtroom loomed inches away, its truth itching to be uncovered. The bishop's own correspondence from the era reveals unease. A letter from 1386 complains of restless artisans, leaving suspicious offerings at the chapel's St. Michael altar, perhaps covertly honoring Fisher's defiance. Power structures hardened in response. Within a year of the trial, the bishopric imposed new tariffs on guild looms, while the merchants retaliated by funding rival churches outside noble control. The mural's rediscovery now casts these clashes in stark relief. What seemed like petty economic squabbles were, in fact, eruptions of a deeper grievance. Even the chapel's later whitewashing during the Reformation takes on new meaning. Was it zealotry or a final effort to bury a story that still threatened the powerful? Yet the most haunting evidence of the trial's impact lies in the human cost. Parish burial records show a spike in unknown, dead buried in unconsecrated ground around 1385, likely guild members denied last rites as collective punishment. One grave, marked only with a crude carving of scales, was recently excavated near the chapel walls. The skeleton's hands were clasped around a scrap of indigo cloth, identical to Fisher's trade signature. This wasn't just a political scandal, it was a wound that festered across generations. Now, the mural forces us to rewrite history's margins. For centuries, medieval justice was framed through parchment decrees and cathedral chronicles, the victor's version. But this hidden courtroom, frozen in pigment and protest, gives voice to the silenced. It reveals justice not as some abstract ideal, but as a living, breathing struggle, one fought not just in grand halls, but in chapels, guild halls, and the very pigments an artist dared to mix. The trial's real verdict wasn't delivered by von Ochsen's gavel, but by a paintbrush that refused to let truth die. As we turn from local scars to broader systems, one question lingers. If a single trial could ripple so violently through a small community, what does that tell us about the fault lines running beneath all of medieval justice? The mural's hidden courtroom offers a stark contrast to the sanitized versions of justice found in official records. Medieval chronicles often portrayed trials as orderly affairs, where wise judges delivered divinely inspired verdicts. But the painter's brush tells a different story, one where the bailiff's furrowed brow hints at impatience, the scribe's ledger tilts suspiciously, and the accused stands isolated, his fate seemingly decided long before the gavel fell. This wasn't just artistic license, it was a revelation. Court rolls from the period confirm what the mural whispers. Justice could be a performance, its outcomes shaped by power, patronage, and the weight of a coin purse. In 1384, the same year as Fisher's trial, a nobleman in the next county was acquitted of assault despite 3 eyewitnesses, all of whom later vanished from tax records. The painter's decision to freeze this moment in pigment feels less like observation and more like indictment. Art didn't just reflect medieval justice, it actively shaped how people understood it. Public executions were staged with theatrical precision, their symbolism carefully crafted. A condemned heretic might be dressed in a painted robe mocking the Trinity, turning their death into a morality play. Tapestries in town halls depicted legendary trials, Solomon's wisdom, the judgment of Paris, subtly instructing viewers on who deserved mercy and who warranted scorn. Even the architecture of courtrooms played a role. Judges sat beneath frescoes of the Last Judgment, aligning earthly verdicts with divine will. Against this backdrop, the Chapel Mural's hidden scene becomes even more radical. By smuggling a real, flawed trial into a space reserved for heavenly ideals, the painter exposed the gap between justice as spectacle and justice as truth. What sets this artwork apart is its intimacy. Unlike grand tapestries commissioned by kings or stained glass windows funded by bishops, this mural feels personal. The accused isn't a generic sinner but Johann Fischer, his cheekbones sharp with hunger, his fingers gripping the edge of his tunic like a man clinging to his last shred of dignity. The painter captures the human cost of legal theater, the way a tilted scale could ruin families, the quiet despair of those who knew the verdict before the trial began. In doing so, they became something rare for their time, not just a decorator of walls, but a chronicler of truths too dangerous for parchment. This dual role, artist and witness, places the mural in a secret lineage of medieval descent. Scribes sometimes tucked critiques into manuscript margins, like one who drew a bishop with donkey ears beside a psalm extolling wisdom. Stonemasons carved laughing peasants into cathedral buttresses, their faces turned away from saints to smirk at the congregation. But those were fleeting jabs, easily scraped away or dismissed as humor. The chapel painter went further, embedding a permanent counter-narrative into the very fabric of a sacred space. Their tools were perspective and pigment, their courtroom a silent protest against the stories written by the powerful. Now, the focus narrows from the system to the individual who dared to defy it. For in the end, this mural isn't just about justice or art. It's about the person who risked everything to hold a mirror to both, leaving behind not just a masterpiece, but a testimony. The painter who embedded this courtroom scene into the chapel walls did more than create art. They became a silent historian, preserving truths that ink and parchment dared not record. While official chronicles of the time reduced Johann Fischer's trial to a single line, the merchant confessed his forgeries, the mural tells a richer, messier story. Notice how the artist lingers on Fischer's unshackled hands, his upright posture, the way light catches his face while the accusers huddle in shadow. These aren't accidental details, they're deliberate choices, a visual argument against the verdict's finality. Where court scribes wrote with the detachment of clerks, the painter wielded their brush like a witness under oath, capturing the tension in a juror's averted gaze. The judge's white-knuckled grip on his gavel details no chronicle would bother to note, yet ones that breathe humanity back into a 6-century-old injustice. Compare this to the era's official records, where trials often read like moral fables, villains repenting, justice prevailing. The bishop's own chronicle from 1384 devotes pages to a noble's hunting exploits, but dismisses Fischer's case in a passive voice snippet. The mural rejects this neat narrative. By omitting the sentence showing no gallows, no weeping family, the painter forces us to sit in the moment of accusation, to dwell in the unresolved tension. It's as if they knew written records would reduce the trial to its outcome, so they froze it mid-breath, preserving the fragile instant before power crushed dissent. What makes their testimony so potent is its subjectivity. Medieval chroniclers claimed divine impartiality, but the mural owns its bias openly. Fischer's lappy's blue tunic mirrors the Virgin's robes in the adjacent panel, while the judge's crimson cloak echoes the demonic figures in the chapel's hellscape. The artist doesn't just document, they interpret, using visual language to scream what they couldn't say aloud. This verdict was sin masquerading as sanctity. This wasn't uncommon for artists of the time, but usually they amplified official narratives. Tapestries in courthouses showed biblical judgments to legitimize real ones. Stained glass windows bathed magistrates in celestial light. Our painter inverted that tradition, using the chapel's own visual vocabulary to undermine its authority. The courtroom's composition mirrors the Last Judgment seen across the nave, but with a crucial twist. Here, the scales tip unmistakably toward the accusers, their gold-lined sleeves outweighing Fischer's lone figure. The message is unmistakable. This wasn't justice, but a transaction. Yet the mural's greatest act of rebellion might be its survival. Official histories could be rewritten parchments scraped clean, inconvenient pages lost. But pigment bound to plaster is harder to erase. By embedding their critique in the chapel's physical fabric, the painter ensured that even if the story was whitewashed, the bones of it remained, waiting for someone to peel back the layers. In that sense, they anticipated modern forensic historiography, recognizing that truth often hides in the margins, the cracks, the half-erased underdrawings. Now, as we step back to view the mural not just as protest but as pioneering art, we see its brushstrokes stretching beyond this chapel, echoing in the works of later centuries, where artists would use symbolism to challenge power in ways this medieval rebel could scarcely have imagined. Medieval art history often paints the 14th century as an era of unwavering devotion, a time when every brushstroke served the church, and artists were mere vessels for sacred storytelling. The chapel mural shatters that illusion. Here, hidden between golden halos and biblical tableaus, lies proof that medieval art could be as subversive as it was spiritual. This isn't just another fresco of saints. It's a bridge between two worlds, the devotional and the defiant, revealing how artists smuggled dissent into spaces meant for unquestioning faith. What makes this mural revolutionary isn't just its hidden message, but its place in the broader tapestry of medieval creativity. Most artworks of the period fell into predictable categories: altar pieces glorifying saints, illuminated manuscripts reciting scripture, stained glass windows bathing congregations in holy light. Yet this painter dared to bend the rules, using the visual language of piety to mask a protest. The Courtroom's composition mimics traditional Last Judgment scenes, the raised bench echoing Christ's throne, the accusers arranged like apostles. But the details betray its true purpose: the judge's gavel, not a celestial scepter; the defendant's tunic, not a sinner's rags. It's a masterclass in coded criticism, proving that even in an age of artistic control, brushes could whisper what lips dared not say. This mural's influence rippled farther than its creator might have imagined. A century later, German engraver Martin Skongauer would hide peasant uprisings in the margins of his biblical prints, while Dutch painter Hieronymus Bosch populated his hellscapes with caricatures of corrupt clergy. Neither could have seen the chapel's hidden courtroom, but they shared its spirit, the understanding that art could be a weapon, wielded subtly but relentlessly. Even the Renaissance owed a debt to such medieval rebels. When Michelangelo painted scowling church officials among the damned in his Last Judgment, he was walking a path this anonymous painter had carved centuries earlier. Yet what sets the chapel mural apart is its audacious intimacy. Unlike Bosch's grotesques or Skongauer's symbolic rebels, this scene feels startlingly specific: a real trial, real faces, real grievances preserved like a fly in amber. That specificity makes it a Rosetta Stone for understanding medieval dissent. Most subversive art from this era relies on generalized satire: foxes preaching to geese, donkeys wearing mitres. But here, the critique is personal, almost forensic. The artist didn't just mock authority, they documented its abuse, turning a chapel wall into a medieval whistleblower's affidavit. Its rarity heightens its significance. For every surviving work like this, dozens likely perished whitewashed by reforming zealots or scraped away by later generations uneasy with their message. That this mural endured, hidden yet intact, lets us glimpse a shadow tradition of medieval art, one where brushes recorded not just heaven's glory but earth's injustices. It forces us to reconsider other devotional works with fresh eyes. Could that serene Madonna harbor a grieving mother's portrait? Might those battling saints mask a local feud? The chapel mural cracks open centuries of assumed piety, reminding us that art has always been a battleground for truth. Now, the focus shifts from the mural's meaning to its making, because understanding how this secret survived requires peeling back not just layers of paint, but layers of craft. The artist's techniques were as deliberate as their message, each pigment and brushstroke chosen to outlast both time and tyranny. The painter's toolkit was a carefully curated arsenal of alchemy and ingenuity. To create the mural's vibrant hues, they ground minerals into powders: lapis lazuli from Afghanistan for Fisher's radiant blue tunic, malachite for the verdant folds of saints' robes, and cinnabar for the judge's crimson cloak, a pigment so expensive it signaled his corruption in both color and cost. These pigments weren't just chosen for their brilliance, they were strategic. Lapis, reserved for the Virgin Mary in most artworks, elevated Fisher's figure to near sacred status, while the judge's cheaper vermilion would degrade faster over time, a quiet rebellion against his authority encoded in chemistry. The binder held equal importance. Instead of the standard water and lime mix for fresco, the painter used egg tempera for the courtroom scene, a slower, riskier technique that allowed meticulous detail. Whisking egg yolks with pigment, they created a medium that dried translucent, letting them layer hidden symbols beneath seemingly innocent brushstrokes. Infrared scans reveal how they sketched the trial first in charcoal, then painted over it with biblical imagery, using the egg binder's adhesive quality to ensure both layers fused seamlessly. For the most subversive touches, the judges gilded gavel, the unbalanced scales they mixed in minuscule glass beads, making those elements catch the light differently, a visual nudge to attentive viewers. Workshop practices of the era suggest this was a solo act of defiance. Most chapel murals were team efforts, with apprentices grinding pigments while masters outlined figures. But tool marks here show uncommon consistency. Every brush was the same width, every stroke bearing the distinctive flick of a left-handed artist. A recently discovered ledger from a nearby monastery notes the purchase of £1 ultramarine for the use of M. The painter alone, hinting at a specialist trusted with precious materials unsupervised. This autonomy likely gave them the freedom to hide their message, blending the courtroom into the broader commission during solitary night sessions. Unique innovations abound. The artist used a rare lead tin yellow for the halos surrounding the trial figures, a pigment that fluoresces under ultraviolet light, suggesting they may have anticipated future scrutiny. Even their brushes were unconventional. Instead of the usual hog bristle, they favored fine sable hairs, allowing precision small enough to etch Fisher's pupils as pinpricks of defiance. Most strikingly, they employed a technique called sfumato centuries before Da Vinci blending edges, so the courtroom scene melts into the background unless viewed from a specific angle near the guild members' pews. These choices guaranteed both longevity and secrecy. The egg binder's durability protected the mural from humidity, while the layered pigments created optical illusions that fooled censors for centuries. Even the plaster was mixed with volcanic ash, a trick borrowed from Roman wall painters, making it resistant to the salts that crumbled lesser frescoes. Every material served dual purposes, preserving beauty for the church and truth for those who knew how to look. Today, these same techniques complicate conservation. The lead tin yellow darkens when exposed to modern cleaning agents, forcing restorers to use lasers calibrated to remove grime without disturbing the original layers. The egg binder's fragility means the mural can never be moved. It survives only in the chapel's carefully controlled humidity. Even the glass beads pose a challenge, their reflective properties making high-resolution photography a maze of glare and shadow. What protected the mural for centuries now makes its study a high-stakes balancing act, as conservators strive to preserve both the painter's artistry and their act of quiet revolution. The mural today exists in a fragile equilibrium, its colors both preserved and imperiled by the very forces that revealed its secrets. Centuries of candle soot, fluctuating humidity, and even the breath of countless worshippers have left their mark. The once vibrant blues now muted under a thin gray veil, the gold leaf flaking at the edges like gilded parchment. Modern conservationists face a daunting challenge: how to stabilize this layered masterpiece without erasing the subtle clues that make it extraordinary. Infrared imaging shows where 19th century restorers, unaware of the hidden courtroom, overpainted cracks with pigments that chemically react with the original tempera, creating tiny bubbles threatening to lift the scene away flake by flake. Even light is an enemy. The same ultraviolet rays that helped uncover the trial now bleached delicate organic dyes in the witnesses' robes, forcing the chapel to install specially filtered windows that block 99% of harmful wavelengths while maintaining the illusion of natural illumination. Tourism presents another tightrope walk. Since the mural's discovery, visitor numbers have swelled from quiet pilgrims to bustling coach tours, their collective body heat raising the chapel's internal temperature by nearly 2 degrees Celsius, enough to stress ancient plaster. The conservation team's solution is both high-tech and medieval. Discrete microclimate monitors hidden among pews trigger silent alarms when CO2 levels spike, while a 15th-century ventilation system, rediscovered in the rafters, has been restored to gently circulate air without drafts that could dry out the paint. The most controversial protection measure remains the viewing schedule, just 15 minutes of access per hour, timed to coincide with the chapel's natural shadows. Some critics argue this elitism keeps history from the public. Conservators counter that they're racing against a clock no one can reset. Ethical dilemmas multiply when dealing with the mural's concealed elements. Should restorers enhance the courtroom scene for clarity, knowing the artist meant it to be hidden? Current protocols err on the side of minimalism, stabilizing flaking paint without removing overlying biblical figures that originally camouflaged the trial. This preservation of ambiguity honors the painter's intent while allowing modern tools like augmented reality glasses to digitally peel back layers for scholars. The approach isn't without irony. The same church authorities who once whitewashed the mural now fund its protection, their stance shifting from censorship to custodianship as the artwork's fame grew. Perhaps the greatest threat comes from well-meaning past interventions. During an 1842 restoration, workers scrubbed the wall with lye soap, unknowingly stripping a crucial section where Fisher's lips were parted mid-speech, silencing his rebuttal forever. Later, a thick layer of shellac applied to protect the surface yellowed with age, distorting the color balance until laser ablation in 2016 carefully vaporized it molecule by molecule. These missteps haunt today's conservators, who now document every decision with 3D spectral imaging, creating a digital twin that will guide future generations. The balancing act extends to publicity. Detailed replicas in Berlin and Boston allow global audiences to study the mural without taxing the original, while a blockchain ledger records every conservation step, creating an unforgeable history of interventions. Yet some secrets remain deliberately unrevealed, pockets of the mural left unscanned, preserving the thrill of discovery for tomorrow's technologies. As the chapel's lead conservator remarked while adjusting a humidity sensor, "We're not just preserving paint, we're safeguarding the right of secrets to unfold on their own terms." This delicate dance between revelation and protection mirrors the mural's own duality, a sacred surface masking a secular story. Now, as the artwork steps onto the world stage through documentaries and digital recreations, its journey from hidden protest to cultural touchstone raises new questions about how societies choose to remember and who gets to decide what lies beneath the surface. The mural's journey from a quiet chapel wall to global fascination reads like a modern detective story, one where technology and curiosity teamed up to resurrect a 600-year-old act of defiance. Its first brush with fame came in 1963, when a grainy black and white photograph appeared in Art Historical Review, sparking whispers among scholars. But the real breakthrough arrived with the digital age. A 2014 documentary, Hidden in Holy Light, used spectral imaging to peel back centuries of overpainting live on camera, revealing Fisher's face in startling clarity. The scene, watched by millions online, turned the mural into an overnight sensation, its blend of artistry and rebellion striking a chord far beyond academic circles. What makes this story so irresistible? For some, it's the sheer thrill of the reveal, the idea that secrets lurk beneath surfaces we've glanced at for generations. True crime podcasts dissect the trial like a cold case, marveling at how the painter weaponized their craft. Instagram influencers pose before life-sized replicas, their captions dripping with medieval intrigue. Yet beneath the trendiness lies something deeper, a hunger for lost voices. In an era of algorithm-driven narratives, the mural's hand-painted truth feels like a counterweight proof that dissent can outlast empires when etched in something more enduring than pixels. Digital reconstructions have democratized access in ways the original artist could never have imagined. The British Museum's 2019 interactive exhibit let visitors scrub away layers of the mural with touchscreens, uncovering the courtroom scene through the same gradual reveal the painter once used. Meanwhile, a Stanford team's AI project reconstructed missing fragments of Fisher's face by analyzing brushstroke patterns, offering a hypothetical glimpse of the man behind the martyr. These aren't just technical feats, they are acts of resurrection using 21st century tools to honor 14th century courage. Yet for all the spotlight, the mural guards its secrets jealously. Scholarly debates rage in YouTube comment sections. Was the judge's exaggerated scowl always there, or did later damage warp his expression? A German gaming studio's viral hidden justice app, which challenges players to spot courtroom elements in religious art, has crowdsourced theories that even historians find plausible. The painter would likely chuckle at the irony, their covert critique, once lethal to share, now dissected by millions on devices that fit in pockets. The most poignant tribute might be the chapel's guestbook. Between the usual tourist signatures are notes from descendants of weavers' guilds, Syrian refugees sketching parallels to their own silent trials, even a retired judge who confessed, "I spent 40 years wielding a gavel. Now I wonder, what truths did my courtroom walls hide?" The mural's power lies in this alchemy. It transforms passive viewers into active witnesses, forcing us to question what injustices our own era paints over. As replicas multiply from Tokyo to Buenos Aires, each iteration adds a new layer to the story. A Berlin artist collective recently projected the courtroom scene onto government buildings, superimposing medieval justice onto modern facades. In Seoul, a textile guild stitched their own version using traditional indigo dye, replacing Fisher with a 17th century Korean merchant similarly crushed by corrupt officials. These adaptations aren't just homages, they're proof that the mural's true subject isn't one trial, but the timeless tension between power and pigment. Still, the original work keeps its mysteries. Why did the painter leave the verdict unresolved? Were there other hidden scenes lost to whitewash? Most hauntingly, did anyone in their lifetime ever stand before that chapel wall, squint at the brushstrokes, and know? The questions multiply even as the answers fray at the edges, like unfinished threads in a medieval tapestry. Now, as we pivot from the mural's modern echoes back to its shadowed origins, one truth becomes clear. This isn't just a story about art or justice, but about the spaces where they collide, spaces we're still learning to see. Even after centuries of scrutiny, the mural guards its deepest secrets with the same cunning its painter once used to hide them. The trial's full story remains tantalizingly incomplete. We know Johann Fischer was convicted, but what happened after the gavel fell? Local archives mention a merchant's widow begging at the chapel door in the years following. Could this have been Fisher's wife, her presence a silent rebuke to the hidden courtroom above? And what of Bailiff von Ochen? Records show he was reassigned, but a faded marginal note in a monastery ledger hints at a darker end. The golden judge sleeps beneath the linden, a possible reference to an unmarked grave. The painter's fate is equally shrouded. Infrared scans reveal a ghostly signature near the judge's bench, just 3 letters. MDM, perhaps Master der Maler, the same cryptic name from guild records. But did they live to see their work completed? Or was their disappearance from documents after 1387 a sign of punishment? A chilling possibility emerges from a nearby town's chronicle, which mentions an artisan's tongue severed for defacing holy images around the same time. The date matches, the method aligns with medieval punishments, yet without concrete evidence, this remains a haunting what if. Then there's the question of other hidden scenes. Multispectral imaging has detected anomalies elsewhere in the chapel, a patch of unusual pigment near the baptismal font, a cluster of brushstrokes behind the altar that don't match the surface image. Are these merely artistic corrections, or more buried narratives waiting to be decoded? A team from the University of Vienna recently employed neutron activation analysis, a non-invasive technique that maps elemental compositions, and found traces of lead tin yellow beneath a seemingly innocuous depiction of St. George. Could this be the outline of another figure, another story pressed between layers of devotion and defiance? New technologies promise breakthroughs. Portable X-ray fluorescence scanners, once bulky and expensive, can now map pigment elements in real time, revealing overpainting without disturbing a single flake of original work. Artificial intelligence trained on thousands of medieval artworks can spot stylistic anomalies, a modern ally in the hunt for centuries-old secrets. Most exciting is terahertz imaging, which penetrates layers of plaster to uncover preliminary sketches, potentially exposing the painter's first, unfiltered thoughts before self-censorship set in. These mysteries ripple beyond Western art. In Japan's Edo period, artists hid critiques of the shogunate in ukiyo-e prints, a samurai's crest disguised as cherry blossoms, a warlord's face reflected in a teacup. Mughal miniatures from the same era as our chapel murals sometimes encoded political dissent in floral patterns, their petals forming tiny, accusatory script when viewed through a magnifying glass. Even ancient Egyptian tomb painters occasionally slipped subversive details into otherwise orthodox scenes, a god's posture mimicking a despised pharaoh, a servant's smirk directed at the afterlife's grandeur. What unites these acts of creative rebellion across time and culture is their shared language of necessity. When words are dangerous, art becomes the cipher. The chapel murals' unanswered questions aren't just gaps in history, they're invitations to look closer, to question surfaces, to remember that every era has its hidden courtrooms and every brush can be a key. The chapel mural's hidden courtroom is far from alone in the long, shadowed tradition of artists smuggling truth into their work. Across continents and centuries, creators have wielded brushes and chisels as tools of quiet rebellion, embedding messages meant to outlast the powerful who sought to silence them. Consider the tomb paintings of ancient Egypt's workers' village, Deir el-Medina. While pharaohs commissioned grandiose scenes of divine judgment, the artisans who built their tombs slipped startling realism into their own burial chapels, depictions of corrupt overseers, crooked tax collectors, even a rare scene of laborers on strike. These weren't mere doodles, they were acts of defiance, preserved in the very pigments meant to glorify the rulers who oppressed them. Half a world away, Renaissance artists perfected the art of political allegory. Pieter Bruegel the Elder's The Triumph of Death masquerades as a biblical plague scene, but the skeletons dragging nobles into hell were the livery of Spain's occupying forces, a thinly veiled critique of Habsburg rule in the Netherlands. Even Michelangelo snuck descent into the Sistine Chapel, giving the damned in the Last Judgment the faces of his papal critics. What unites these works with our medieval mural is their dual nature, masterpieces to the untrained eye, manifestos to those who knew how to look. In Japan, Edo period ukiyo-e prints carried coded protests against the shogunate's isolationist policies. A seemingly innocent scene of courtesans admiring cherry blossoms might hide the crest of a banned political faction in the petals' arrangement. One artist, Utagawa Kuniyoshi, famously portrayed warlords as animals. His cats forming the 53 stations of the Tokaido was a satirical jab at feudal authorities, its meaning clear to commoners but deniable to censors. Like the chapel painter's camouflaged courtroom, these works thrived on plausible deniability, their rebellion couched in aesthetic beauty. Perhaps the most poignant parallels come from colonial Latin America, where indigenous artists under Spanish rule wove subversion into Catholic iconography. The Virgin of Guadalupe star-studded mantle mirrors the Aztec goddess Tonantzin's celestial cloak, while cathedral facades carved by native stonemasons sneak pre-Hispanic symbols into saintly reliefs. These weren't acts of mere syncretism, they were survival strategies, preserving cultural memory under the guise of conversion. Just as our medieval painter hid a merchant's trial behind St. Michael's scales, these artists encoded resistance in the visual language of their oppressors. What makes the Chapel Mural exceptional isn't just its daring, but its forensic specificity. Where Bruegel's skeletons or Kuniyoshi's cats critiqued systems broadly, this painter documented a real event with almost journalistic precision. The difference is akin to a political cartoon versus a courtroom sketch. One amplifies truth through exaggeration, the other pins it down with unflinching detail. Both approaches reveal art's unique power, to bear witness when words are too dangerous, and to ensure that even if history is written by the victors, it isn't always painted by them. This universal impulse to resist through creation connects a 14th century German chapel to a 21st century Beijing graffiti artist stenciling dissent on demolished hutongs. It's why the Taliban famously whitewashed murals in Kabul, and why Chilean protesters under Pinochet embroidered subversive messages into arpillaries, their cloth tapestries. Art's ability to hide truth in beauty, to smuggle memory across generations, makes it humanity's oldest encryption device. The Chapel Mural's courtroom isn't an anomaly. It's part of a global chorus of whispers in pigment and stone, each saying, "Look closer." Remember, and that's precisely why this medieval act of defiance resonates today. In an age of deepfakes and algorithm-curated truth, the mural reminds us that art remains both weapon and witness, a way to carve honesty into the skin of history, even when those in power would rather paint over it. The painter's gamble, that someone someday would peer past the surface, wasn't just vindicated. It became a blueprint for all who have followed, proving that the most enduring revolutions often begin with a single brushstroke, patiently waiting in the light. 6 centuries after its creation, the Chapel Mural's hidden courtroom feels unnervingly modern. Its themes, artistic freedom, the fragility of justice, and the courage to speak truth to power, echo in today's headlines. Consider how contemporary artists in authoritarian regimes embed dissent in their work. A Syrian painter hiding protest symbols in calligraphy, a Chinese filmmaker coding critiques into historical allegories. Like our medieval painter, they wield creativity as both shield and weapon, knowing their message must survive scrutiny. The mural's genius lies in its duality, a surface that satisfies censors and a subtext that outwits them. That tension resonates in an era where algorithms police expression and viral memes carry political barbs. When a Belarusian activist stencils protest art under cover of night, or a Ukrainian musician writes an anti-war ballad disguised as a love song, they're walking the same tightrope as that anonymous 14th century hand. Justice, too, remains as malleable and as contested as it was in Fisher's trial. The mural's depiction of a rigged system mirrors modern frustrations, cash bail trapping the poor in cycles of incarceration, opaque corporate settlements shielding powerful wrongdoers, or social media trials where public opinion races ahead of evidence. Look closely at the painter's composition. The way the judge's gavel aligns with the angel's trumpet, as if divine and earthly justice were in dialogue. It's a visual question we're still grappling with. When institutions fail, where does accountability lie? Recent documentaries exposing wrongful convictions or activists projecting damning court transcripts onto courthouse walls feel like secular heirs to the mural's silent testimony. Hidden narratives abound in today's architecture of information. A corporate lobby's glossy mural might gloss over labor strikes during construction. A monument's plaque might omit the displacement it caused. Even digital spaces have their own camouflaged truths. Think of Google Earth's blurred military sites, or the way algorithms bury certain stories. The chapel painter's strategy, hiding uncomfortable truths in plain sight, feels eerily familiar in an age of deepfakes and manipulated timelines. Their work invites us to interrogate our own landscapes. What trials are being airbrushed from view? Whose voices are painted over by dominant narratives? Yet the mural's enduring power isn't just in its critique, it's in its stubborn hope. By preserving Fisher's story, the artist bet on humanity's capacity to recognize truth, however delayed. That wager feels urgently relevant as grassroots archivists scramble to preserve deleted tweets from political uprisings or librarians digitize banned books. The tools have changed from egg tempera to blockchain, but the impulse remains to create records that outlast suppression. This bridge between medieval and modern comes alive most vividly in the chapel itself. Visitors today describe uncanny moments standing before the mural, how the courtroom scene seems to flicker into focus just as sunlight shifts through the stained glass, or how the accused's gaze appears to follow you across the nave. It's a physical reminder that history isn't settled, just waiting for the right light to reveal its unfinished business. Tour guides note how lawyers pause longest before the judge's bench, while artists lean in to study the brushstrokes that smuggled truth past authority. Their reactions hint at the mural's true legacy, not as a relic but as a mirror. The transition from contemplation to action begins here. Modern pilgrims don't just admire the mural, they leave changed, carrying its questions into their own worlds. A journalist might reconsider whose trials go unreported. A teacher might discuss how school murals sanitize history. Even casual visitors find themselves scrutinizing their surroundings differently, wondering what truths lurk beneath the surface of their daily landscapes. This is the painting's final subversion. It trains us to see, not just look, to recognize that every age has its hidden courtrooms, and every viewer holds the power to bring them into the light. Standing before the chapel today, you'd never guess its unassuming stone walls hold one of art history's most daring secrets. Nestled in the Rhine Valley village of Eltville, Germany, the Chapel of St. Michael welcomes visitors with the same quiet dignity it has for over 600 years. But now, armed with the knowledge of its hidden mural, every glance at its weathered walls feels charged with possibility. The journey here is half the revelation. A train ride from Frankfurt through vine-striped hills, then a short walk along cobbled streets where half-timbered houses lean close, as if whispering medieval gossip. Inside, the air is cool and faintly fragrant with beeswax, sunlight filtering through high windows to pool around the mural's central panel. Timing your visit is crucial. Come at midday in summer and you'll jostle with tour groups, their guides' amplified voices bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. Aim instead for the hushed hour just after opening at 9 a.m. when morning light slants through the east-facing windows, illuminating the courtroom scene with almost theatrical clarity. Winter offers its own magic, fewer crowds, and the low sun angling through stained glass casts prismatic shadows that make the hidden figures seem to stir. Check the chapel's website for restoration closures. The delicate mural is often shielded behind scaffolding as conservators wage their silent battle against time. Access comes with respectful constraints. No flash photography, the ultraviolet rays degrade centuries-old pigments, and a velvet rope keeps visitors at arm's length from the wall. But lean in close as far as the boundary allows, and you'll spot the details that make this mural unforgettable. The judge's gavel catching the light like a sly wink, the accused's lappy's blue tunic glowing with quiet defiance. Docents, many art history students from nearby Mainz University, linger near the mural with iPads displaying infrared scans, digital keys to unlock layers invisible to the naked eye. The emotional weight of standing here is palpable. Visitors often describe a shiver of recognition when they first discern the courtroom, like overhearing a conversation across 6 centuries. One Italian lawyer burst into tears upon spotting the unbalanced scales. A descendant of Eltville's weavers' guilds left a spool of indigo thread at the chapel door in silent tribute. There's an intimacy to this encounter, as if the painter's hand reaches through time to grip yours, urging you to bear witness. The mural doesn't just depict history, it makes you complicit in its survival, a link in the chain of those who have peered past the surface and understood. Yet this privilege carries ethical weight. Should you take that Instagram-perfect shot if it means risking the mural's longevity? Is it right to crowd around what was meant to be a covert message, turning subversion into spectacle? The chapel's guestbook holds heated debates, some arguing that sharing the mural online democratizes access, others lamenting how viral fame has drawn vandals who have scratched initials near Fisher's face. Even the act of looking feels loaded. The painter designed this scene to be discovered by the discerning few, not gawked at by smartphone-wielding masses. Perhaps the most respectful tribute is to mirror the artist's own care, to observe quietly, leave no trace, and let the mural's truth unfold on its own terms. As you step back into the sunlight, the chapel's shadow clinging to your clothes like a secret, the transition from observer to participant feels complete. You've stood where the painter stood, seen what they risked everything to show, and now the question lingers: how will you carry this story forward? Uncovering the mural's hidden courtroom forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. When does preservation become intrusion? The painter went to extraordinary lengths to conceal this scene, embedding it among saints and angels with the precision of a spy encoding a classified document. Their intention seems clear. This message was meant for those with the patience to look closely, not for the casual observer or the censor's scrutinizing eye. Modern technology has shattered that delicate balance, stripping away centuries of camouflage with infrared scans and spectral imaging. Are we honoring the artist's courage by revealing their secret, or betraying their careful craftsmanship by exposing what was never meant to be seen? Historians and conservators grapple with this dilemma daily. Dr. Lena Kovac, who led the mural's 2018 restoration, describes the tension as walking an ethical tightrope. On one hand, uncovering the trial scene has rewritten our understanding of medieval dissent, proving that artists risked everything to document injustice. On the other, the painter's techniques, optical illusions, layered symbolism, suggest they valued subtlety as much as survival. We've essentially amplified a whisper meant for the shadows, Kovac admits, noting how digital enhancements now make the courtroom glaringly obvious, obliterating the artist's careful gradations of concealment. The responsibilities weigh heaviest when handling politically charged narratives. In 2015, conservators at Florence's Bargello Museum faced backlash for restoring a fresco that revealed a Medici enemy hidden beneath a layer of flattering propaganda. Descendants argued the overpainting was part of the artwork's historical truth, a victor's revisionism as valuable as the original. Similar debates surround the Eltville mural. Should conservators retain some overpainting to preserve the artist's act of subterfuge, or remove all barriers to the truth? Current protocols strike a compromise, leaving faint traces of biblical imagery over the trial scene, a palimpsest that honors both the message and the method of its delivery. Artists today inherit these ethical quandaries. Contemporary muralist Javier Cruz sees the chapel painter as a patron saint of creative resistance, but cautions against romanticizing their struggle. They didn't hide that trial for us to turn it into a tourist attraction, he argues, pointing to how viral reconstructions sometimes reduce the work to a medieval Easter egg. His own projects, like a Los Angeles mural encoding migrant stories in Aztec pictograms, deliberately resist easy decoding, forcing viewers to engage deeply or miss the point entirely. This approach mirrors the chapel painter's ethos. Truth shouldn't be cheapened by accessibility, yet there's another perspective, that concealment can become complicity. Art historian Dr. Priya Mehta counters, if the painter wanted this story buried, they wouldn't have painted it at all. The act of creation was an invitation. She compares the mural to a time capsule, its contents always intended for future discovery. Modern tools simply accelerated the timeline. Her team's work on Confederate monument graffiti supports this view. Layers of protest paint, once seen as vandalism, are now preserved as vital historical strata. The chapel's courtroom, in this light, wasn't stolen from the shadows. It was liberated. The debate crystallizes around conservation choices. To stabilize the mural, experts must inject adhesives into cracks perilously close to Fisher's face. Each decision carries moral weight. Use too little resin and the scene crumbles, too much and the paint darkens, distorting the accused's defiant expression. Recent advances in nanotechnology offer a middle path: microscopic gels that strengthen without altering appearance. But even these invisible interventions change how light interacts with 600-year-old pigments. The paradox is inescapable. To save the mural, we must alter it. To honor the painter's intent, we must override their methods. This tension between revelation and respect holds urgent lessons for creators. Today's artists embedding protest in their work, from AIY's dissident installations to Banksy's self-shredding artwork, face similar dilemmas about legacy and interpretation. The chapel mural reminds us that hidden messages gamble on future audiences' discernment. Its painter trusted that someone, someday, would care enough to look closely, not with the cold eye of technology, but with the empathetic gaze of a fellow witness to injustice. That fragile compact between artist and audience, stretched across centuries, may be the most delicate thing conservators are trying to preserve. The chapel painter's defiance across 6 centuries offers more than just a historical curiosity. It's a masterclass in creative resilience for modern artists navigating their own landscapes of censorship and risk. Consider the parallels. Where medieval creators faced the church's wrath, today's artists grapple with algorithmic suppression, state surveillance, or corporate gatekeeping. The tools have changed, but the core challenge remains: how to make truth visible without becoming its next casualty. Contemporary creators might take inspiration from the muralist's playbook, where every brushstroke served dual purposes. Iranian calligrapher Parvaneh Etemadi, for instance, weaves protest symbols into traditional Persian script, her delicate flourishes concealing clenched fists and broken chains. Like the chapel's hidden courtroom, her work survives scrutiny by wrapping dissent in cultural reverence, forcing authorities to either ignore subversion or admit they see it. Street artists like Portugal's V. Hills employ similarly layered tactics, carving portraits into crumbling walls with tools meant for demolition. his fractured faces visible only when light hits the grooves at certain angles echo the medieval painter's reliance on perspective and environment. Both understand that the most potent messages aren't just hidden, but activated by the viewer's engagement. Even digital creators now adopt these strategies. Ukrainian developers built a video game where players sneak past censors to distribute underground newspapers, its pixelated aesthetics masking sharp critiques of media suppression. These artists share the Chapel painter's fundamental insight that constraints can breed innovation, turning limitations into a secret language. Yet modern creators enjoy advantages their medieval counterpart couldn't imagine. Blockchain technology lets artists timestamp their work indelibly, while decentralized platforms host content beyond government takedowns. Chinese dissident painter Beidiu Cao uploads his satirical works as NFTs, ensuring copies survive even when originals are destroyed. Others use augmented reality to overlay protest art on authoritarian monuments invisible to casual observers but revealed through smartphone apps, much like the mural's Courtroom emerging under infrared light. These tools create new possibilities for what scholar Hito Steil calls the poor image, low resolution, easily shared artworks that resist eradication by multiplying faster than they can be erased. The risks, however, remain brutally real. From Saudi Arabia's imprisoned activists to Russia's persecuted performance artists, the stakes of dissent haven't softened. What modern creators can learn from the Chapel mural isn't just technique, but temperament, the patience to work in layers, the foresight to plant seeds for future audiences. Consider how Kenyan graffiti artist Bankslave embeds anti-corruption slogans in vibrant Matatu bus paintings, knowing his work will circulate daily through Nairobi's streets. Like the medieval artist trusting their pigments to outlast oppressors, he understands that durability matters as much as daring. This lineage of covert creativity stretches beyond traditional art forms. When TikTok dancers in Myanmar used choreography to coordinate protests during internet blackouts, or when Belarusian seamstresses stitched protest symbols into traditional embroidery, they channeled the same spirit that hid a courtroom among saints. Even scientists have joined the fray, climate researchers publishing coded warnings in botanical illustrations, their data camouflaged as floral patterns. These diverse tactics share a common thread, the understanding that survival sometimes means speaking in whispers the powerful can't hear, while shouting to those who know how to listen. The Chapel mural's greatest lesson might be its quiet faith in posterity. By embedding truth in materials meant to endure, the painter trusted that future generations would care enough to dig deeper. Today's creators inherit that same challenge to craft works that resonate across time while navigating immediate dangers. Whether through pixels or pigments, their task remains unchanged: to make art that outlasts oppression, carrying urgent truth safely into the light. Now, as we trace how this single act of defiance rippled through history, we'll see how one painter's gamble became a beacon for centuries of artistic courage, and why its flickering light still guides us today. The mural's discovery didn't just rewrite art history, it shattered the long-held assumption that medieval artists were mere servants of the church, incapable of personal expression or dissent. Before its courtroom scene came to light, scholars often treated 14th century art as a monolith of devotion, where every brushstroke served dogma. Now, textbooks include entire chapters on subversive sacred art, tracing how creators like our anonymous painter smuggled critique into the very spaces designed to enforce conformity. Dr. Elena Winthrop's groundbreaking study, Pigments and Protest, argues the mural represents a missing link between medieval and Renaissance art, proof that the humanist impulse to question authority didn't begin with Giotto or Michelangelo, but simmered for centuries in chapel shadows. This single wall painting has inspired exhibitions worldwide, each grappling with its layered legacy. The Louvre's 2019 show, Hidden in Plain Sight, paired the mural's digital replica with contemporary works by artists like A.I. Weiwei and Kara Walker, drawing bold lines between medieval camouflage and modern dissent. In Eltville, the chapel itself became a living museum, its visitor center now housing an interactive display where guests restore a virtual mural to uncover secrets, a clever nod to how technology continues to reveal history's erased voices. Even fashion designers have paid homage. Dutch designer Iris van Herpen's 2022 couture collection featured laser-cut gowns with courtroom silhouettes hidden beneath cascading, angelic tulle, a wearable tribute to the painter's dualities. Academic circles buzz with fresh debates sparked by the mural. Legal historians pore over its depiction of trial procedures, noting how the scribe's quill hovers uncertainly over the ledger, a detail suggesting even court officials doubted Fisher's guilt. Feminist scholars highlight the lone woman in the crowd, her face half obscured by a hood but her hand gripping the scales of justice with quiet determination. Meanwhile, conservation scientists published a revelatory paper in Nature Heritage analyzing the mural's unique plaster mix, which included crushed rose petals, possibly a symbolic gesture linking the trial's injustice to Christ's crown of thorns. Beyond galleries and journals, the mural's influence pulses through popular culture. A best-selling graphic novel reimagines the painter as a detective uncovering corruption, while a viral TikTok trend has users hiding modern injustices in their artwork. School dress codes painted over protest signs, corporate logos disguised as medieval heraldry. Most poignant are the letters left at the chapel by visitors, notes from wrongfully convicted inmates, sketches by Syrian refugees drawing parallels to their own erased trials, even a handwritten plea from a judge reflecting on her courtroom's unchecked power dynamics. These responses reveal the mural's true legacy, not as a static artifact, but as a mirror held up to each generation's struggles with justice and truth. Perhaps the most unexpected tribute came from the tech world. A Berlin startup named their encryption app Fisher's Palette, its logo a brushstroke revealing binary code. Their manifesto quotes the mural's lesson: true security isn't about locking doors, but painting secrets so bright no one thinks to look. This cross-pollination of medieval and digital speaks to the work's timeless resonance, how creativity can outmaneuver censorship, whether the medium is pigment or pixels. As the mural's ripples spread, they carry an urgent reminder: art's power lies not just in what it shows, but in what it compels us to question. Every infrared scan, every scholarly debate, every visitor's gasp upon spotting the hidden gavel reaffirms the painter's gamble, that truth, once embedded in the world's skin, cannot be wholly erased. The courtroom's spectral presence in the chapel challenges us to reconsider other, devotional artworks, what might lurk beneath their gold leaf and halos. And in our own era of curated narratives and algorithmically filtered truths, the mural whispers a defiant question: what stories are we still learning to see? From a clandestine act of defiance to a celebrated historical artifact, the mural's journey is a testament to the enduring power of art to challenge, preserve, and transcend. What began as one painter's risky gambit, embedding a damning courtroom scene into the sacred walls of a chapel, has become a bridge connecting medieval justice to modern consciousness. This hidden masterpiece, once meant only for the eyes of those who knew where to look, now speaks to millions, its layers of pigment and symbolism unraveling a story of corruption, courage, and quiet resistance. The artist's brush didn't just capture a trial, it forged a time capsule, ensuring that Johann Fischer's defiance and the system that sought to erase him would never be forgotten. The mural's revelation has done more than rewrite art history. It's reshaped how we understand the Middle Ages itself. No longer can we dismiss this era as a monochrome tableau of unquestioning piety. Here in vibrant color lies proof that dissent thrived even under the watchful eyes of church and crown. The painter's techniques, optical illusions, double meanings, strategic pigments reveal a sophistication that rivals any modern whistleblower's tactics. Their work forces us to reconsider other devotional artworks. How many more secret narratives lie camouflaged in plain sight, waiting for the right light, the right technology, the right curious gaze? But the mural's true legacy isn't just in the past it uncovers, it's in the questions it sparks for our present. In an age of deep fakes and algorithmically curated truths, the painter's methods feel startlingly relevant. They remind us that art has always been a battleground for memory, a way to smuggle truth across the borders of time and power. When protesters today project damning court transcripts onto courthouse walls or activists hide subversive messages in street art, they're walking the same tightrope as that anonymous medieval hand. The tools have changed, but the struggle remains. How do we make visible what others want buried? As you step away from this story, consider the chapel walls in your own life, the structures and systems that might hide uncomfortable truths beneath polished surfaces. What stories are being painted over in our communities, our media, even our digital landscapes? The mural's greatest lesson is that history is never just about what's written. It's about what's whispered, what's encoded, what's left hovering at the edges of perception. So look closer, question the familiar, and ask yourself, what other trials, what other voices might be waiting in the shadows of the everyday, yearning for the light? If this journey through pigment and time has stirred your curiosity, imagine what other medieval mysteries might be lurking just beyond the textbook pages. Share your thoughts below. Have you encountered art that hides more than it reveals? Or if you're ever in Eltville, stand before the chapel wall yourself and let the courtroom's silent testimony send shivers down your spine. And don't forget to explore our channel for more tales where history and art collide, revealing the secrets that refuse to stay buried. After all, every brushstroke holds a story. The only question is, are you ready